Remember to, oh shit. Sango look good. I look too fat. Oh. I think I'm going to do a disclaimer on my podcast. Like the contents of this podcast because really mess you up. Not really. Yeah, I've had a rough couple of days. I'm not gonna lie. Just gonna breathe. Almost went down that rabbit hole when someone posted on Instagram, and I say it was my fucking fault because I clicked on the video, so it only said viewer discretion advised, and it showed like some dude hurting an animal, and when I see that, I'm like, want to go through the camera and beat the shit out of the guy who's doing that, but of course I can't, so I stay with this anger. Anyway, enough of that bullshit. First of all, hey you, sorry. Hey you, thank you, welcome to another episode. Sorry, I was adjusting my camera. I got a new camera holder thingy that goes on top of your visor. Before I had it on my windshield, that was crap, so. But this seems to be working good, although I look a little bit chunkier, but whatever. Today I'm going to the gym because I need to work out this funkiness going on in here. I just need to work it out and take it out in some weights, and I could slam those down and beat the shit out of those. So that's exactly what I'm gonna do before I go down the, all that negative self-talk and the usual rigmarole I've known since I've been alive, basically. Hold on. Okay. When you feel yourself almost getting out of control emotionally, deep breaths helps a lot. And you get to center yourself. So today, since the last podcast, or the one before I read my diary, we talked about my mother. It's only fair we talk about my father now. Because next month is his anniversary, August 7th. And so yesterday was July 7th, so got a month to go. So here's the story about my dad. Eli, that's his name. His full name is Eliezer Medina. And his story begins like this. So, him and my mom met in New Jersey in 1972. Yeah, 1972. They were at some festival, music festival. I can't recall what she told me, but it was some sort of festival. And it had finished, and she was with her best friend, Marsha. And he was with his brother, Neff. And so it started raining there. From New Jersey, you know, rain comes out of nowhere. We find one day, then the next day. Then the next time it's like drizzling and raining. So that's exactly what they happened. I think they were walking towards the cars or something like that. Or something. So it started raining, and my mom and Marsha didn't have an umbrella. And so she was standing on the corner of a street somewhere. I can't recall the name of the street. This is in Vineland, New Jersey, by the way. And so my dad and his brother were standing there with an umbrella, and they saw my mom and her friend don't have an umbrella. So they offered, you know, to stand under the umbrella, and that's how they met. So they met. It was a whirlwind romance, I guess. It happened quickly. Actually, I believe they got engaged in, I think she told me December of 1972, I think. And then all I know is that they got married in March of 1973. Where is it? 72? I don't remember dates. So for those of you who've been listening for a while, I get confused on dates and numbers and stuff. By the way, last time I did my diary, I was saying I was 17. It was actually 16 nationality. I was 17. I get so nervous that I forget dates sometimes. I forget numbers. I'm not very good with numbers. That's why I went into the law profession, because paralegals and attorneys and everything are very bad at math. So that's why we go into the law, because there's no math involved there. So I'm in the perfect element. So they met and they got married, and they had, they went to concerts together. They went disco dancing. Apparently, from what my mom told me, he was a wonderful dancer. Hello. So am I. That's where I get it from, my dad. And so, and then in 1974, my mom gets pregnant. And so they were starting to have a family. And January came around in 1975. My mother had toxemia. I think today they call it preeclampsia or something like that. I think, I'm not sure. They're gonna get nervous and I get confused, so don't quote me, please. Google it. Toxemia is basically like your body rejecting the baby, and so it goes out of control, whatever. So my mom went into labor naturally, and so unfortunately he didn't make it, so it was a stillborn. His birthday and death date is January 10th, 1975. His name was Brian Joseph Medina. According to my mom, they had the nursing and everything like that, and already fixed up, and it was horrific. I can't imagine how horrific that is, to lose a child like that in any way, shape, or form. Yeah, if I think about that right now, I'll just go down the rabbit hole, and I don't want to do that. So he passed away, and April of that year, my mom found out she was pregnant again with moi, and so everybody was against it because she had toxemia, and so everybody knew she was going to go through the same rigmarole and same sickness, whatever. But she insisted. Everybody was telling her, you know, she get an abortion, you know, you shouldn't have it, you shouldn't go through with it. And my mom was like dead adamant. She was like, no, I'm gonna have her. Well, they didn't know I was a girl, but I'm gonna have the baby, you know, I wanted this so badly. And so they monitor her, and instead of having her go into labor naturally, they had a C-section, a cesarean section, scheduled for January 22nd, which is my birthday. And so I was born via cesarean, and so they took me into the incubator, and then I was a small little thing. I was like 6 ounces, and I can't remember how tall it was, or like length I was, but I was 6 ounces. I was a little thing. And so they had a baby girl, and everything was looking amazing. They were happy. My dad was a big pothead, and so that was a little bit of an issue. You know, he's kind of like a wild child, like somebody else we know. And so he liked to go to concerts. He liked to, you know, hang out. You know, they were like early 20s. My mother was 23, and my dad was 3 years older than she was. So, I mean, they loved going to concerts and stuff like that. And so, you know, at a certain point, my mom was like, okay, we need to settle down now. We have a kid. We can't go out partying all the time. And my dad was like, why can't we do both? You know, I could just imagine him saying that. And so, you know, there was friction there, you know. Because my mom's very, if you met my mom, you would not believe I'm her daughter, trust me. Because my mom is very conservative, very straight-laced, very quiet. Don't get me wrong, she loves to have a good time and party and stuff like that. But she's not a heavy drinker. She's not, you know, the type to want to, like, party and get all crazy and stuff like that. That's not my mom. That's her daughter. And that's Eli too, my dad. I'm like identical to my dad. My mom said many times she should have, the two names that they were thinking of naming me was Tina, but that would have been too weird, Tina Bedina. Weird. And then my other name would have been Eliza, which is, I guess, a surname of Eliza. But my mom's like, I should have just named you Eliza because you're just like your dad. So, anyhow, so this is all in Jersey. You know, they stayed married for, I want to say, like, they got married in 72, and they got divorced around, I was about 3 or 4 when they got divorced. And so when they got divorced, according to, this is all allegedly from my mom. I'm just getting this from my mom. I have no idea. I was too little, so I don't remember. But allegedly, my father was very, very upset. And very obsessive to the point where whenever he had visitation rights, again, I'm going to preface this. This is the 80s, okay? Or late 70s, early 80s. So things are very, very different than they are now. I understand that. So if my mom were to do this now, she wouldn't get away with it. But back then, you know, he was threatening her, slashing her tires, and threatening every time he would get visitation with me, allegedly, according to my mom, he would threaten to kidnap me, or threaten to, like, you're never going to see your daughter again. And my mom heard that, and she was like, shit. You know, she was trapped. And so she was working at the time called Farm Workers. And she met somebody named Ben Salazar. And so they met each other. Actually, she was dating somebody else, but he was African American. And Eli didn't like that. My grandma didn't like that, you know. So it was, you know, a racial thing with them. Even though my mom really loved him and considers that her one true love. even till today. So my mom stopped dating that guy and started seeing Ben. And then Ben had said, I have friends that live in California. It'd be easy for me to just go there, take Erica, and then just leave. Don't, and since my mom, allegedly, according to my mom, she had custody of me. She had full custody of me. And so my mom's like, okay, this guy is scaring me, and, I'm not sure what's going on, blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, come on, let's go. And so they took off to California. Only my grandmother knew where I was. Eli didn't know where I was. They didn't tell him. So we left to California. We lived in El Monte, California, the first place that we lived in. I was 6 years old at this point. And so we moved to California. So they enrolled me in school, kindergarten, all that stuff. All that stuff happened to me with my stepfather, we'll get to him in another episode. But, yeah, he was a native New Yorker. He was born in the Bronx, New York. And so he was military as well. He was an Army vet, and he went to Vietnam. And so he was very charismatic. He was very, just put it this way, he could sell ice to an Eskimo. He was very charismatic, very, narcissistic. Yeah. Cursed a lot. That's where I get it from. So I apologize if I cuss too much, but being brought up from a native New Yorker, you would too. That's just what I'm used to. It's not ladylike or anything like that. Trust me, I get enough of that from my mom. Not ladylike that you cuss so much. Blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so I turned 10 and I started asking questions about my dad, And I'm like, where is he at? I want to see him, blah, blah, blah. And so since my grandparents lived in the same house, forever at this point, since the 60s, she asked my grandmother for their number. Because back then it was still in the phone book. Their phone was listed on the phone book. So my grandmother looked for my mom's mom, who I'm very, very close to. She took care of me when my mom went to work. She separated from my dad and moved back in with her mom. And so my mom took care of me when she went to work. So I stayed with my grandma. Me and my grandmother were like this. I love my grandmother is my angel. I took care of her. I delivered her doctor's appointments whenever she needed. That was down the line, but, she took care of me. And so I took care of her. And she would come to visit to California periodically, and that was the best time. When she came out to California to visit me, oh my God, I just adored my grandmother. She made the best food. She's just an angel, and I just love her and I miss her. So, I finally talked to him on the phone. I talked to Eli on the phone. And I don't remember what time I would talk to him. Was it once a month? Was it once a week? I don't remember that part. All I remember is as soon as I turned 16, I was allowed to go by myself. And I was allowed to visit him. So my dad paid for my ticket when I was 16 years old. And one of my best memories ever is he took me to a Rolling Stones concert, Voodoo Lounge Tour in 1993. That was my very best memory of him. Of course, he lived in Maryland, so in Virginia, it was right next door, and Washington, D.C. So he took me to the White House, he took me to monuments, he took me to you know, anything historic, because I love history. And so he took me there, and we even went to the Smithsonian Museum, and that was amazing. I had a good time. And so every time after I turned 16, every summer I would go visit him. He would pay for a plane ticket, and I would go back. He's very close to his parents, and despite him living in Maryland, so once a month he would go to New Jersey to visit his parents. And so he took me to go see them. It was about a 3-hour drive from Maryland to New Jersey, to Vineland, New Jersey. And so he would take me to go see his parents. And then since my grandmother lived down the street from his parents, he took me to go see my grandma and spend time with the other side of the family. Now, I was always raised with my mother's side of the family. I'm very close to them. My father's side of the family, I'm not very close to. I see them periodically, but it wasn't like, you know, this relationship or this connection. It was just visiting them and, you know, being more to them, of course. They're my family, but it wasn't the same as being so close to them. I mean, listen, I used to talk to my grandmother like once a week on the phone. All the time. So, and those grandparents I only saw like every summer. And that was it. I didn't feel any real connection with them. When I realized that I was a lot like my father, I favor my father a lot. I should have been named Eliza, because I am very much like my father. Very much stubborn, very much family oriented, very much having a great time, wild child side of me, all that stuff. And I got close to him, you know, but I wasn't as close to him as I was my stepfather, because I live with my stepfather, Ben. I live with Ben, so to me, and granted, I was groomed at a very young age, so I was groomed to know that he was like the be-all, end-all, whatever. And, you know, I treated Eli kind of like a stepfather. Versus Ben, my father, but then Eli like my stepfather. Don't get me wrong, I love my dad, Eli. I really, really do. I just wish I was closer to him. But he is half of me, so of course I love him. I will always love my father. There's no question in that. I was just so upset that I was closer to Ben than I was with Eli, and that's another grief in and of itself, because when he passed away, you know, I was guilty for wanting to have a relationship like I had with Ben with my dad, and I never got to do that. Did I blame my mother? Yes, I did. I very much did, and that's part of the anger that I had to deal with it, because I was angry at her, especially after he passed away, because she didn't let me have a closer relationship. She wasn't with him, wasn't married to him anymore. So yeah, that upset me a lot, and that's a lot of regret and resentment and all that stuff. Finally let that shit go, but for the longest time it was just there, you know, constantly there. So then I met Jim and all that stuff, and then when we still kept in contact, you know, I would see him periodically, but not as much as when I did when I was in high school. As I became an adult, I only saw him like periodically. One time he did come out to California in 2001, and he came up to California, and we had a great time. We did all the attractions, you know, Universal Studio, Disneyland, Vegas, you know, all that stuff. And he did come up to visit me, and that was fun. So after that, you know, and Jim was doing his shenanigans, and he said, you know, he wanted to asked for this, paid for somebody to come visit him, someone he was talking online. And so when I told you the story, when I heard that, I called my dad in Maryland, and I'm like, Dad, can I stay with you for an entire month, because I do not want to be here? And he said, sure. And so I stayed there for an entire month. July of 2002, I stayed there for the entire month. Then looking back, I was guilty, because I was thinking about, what the hell is Jim doing with whatever the fuck her name was over here, and I couldn't really enjoy my time with my father, because all I was thinking about was that. I remember he had a 1-bedroom studio apartment. It was so cute. I remember walking into his living room. There's a kitchen, bathroom in his bedroom. He had it all fixed up, all nice and cute. That was the first time I went to his new apartment, because he had just moved, I want to say a year or so ago. So I hadn't seen his new his new apartment yet. And so that was a thrill for me. He's taking me around, he's showing me around. He had a cute Art Deco. It was like a duplex, so he was living on top of, say, an apartment downstairs, but upstairs had an attic area, and they converted that into a 1-bedroom apartment. So that's where he was staying at. In the house, the host house had properties in back east have long backyards, so it was decorated all nice with flowers and plants and stuff like that. And see, he was living above that. It was so beautiful just to look out there. I saw his car. He had a truck. He had a Honda Civic hatchback and a motorcycle. He had those 3. And so he would take me to Atlantic City, and we stayed there all day. Went to Wildwood. We went to Ocean City, New Jersey. Went to Ocean City, Maryland. Went to my aunt's condo, which is his sister's condo in Ocean City, New Jersey. And we stayed there and had a great time. She lived only 2 blocks from the beach. It was amazing. It had a good time. She was dating somebody new at the time. I hadn't met him, but according to my father, they had issues before. She had to get a restraining order from him. My dad actually stayed at her condo with a gun under his pillow, pew-pew under his pillow, waiting for that dude, because he was starting to get out of control. He told me stories. This was 2 months before I even came to visit him. He told me that he had to stay over at her house because he was becoming erratic or whatever. And so I think the last few days I was there in Maryland visiting him, we actually had dinner with my aunt, his sister, and her boyfriend. So all 4 of us had dinner together. I think it was 3 or 4 nights before I went back home. I met him. I mean, he seemed like a cool dude. Of course, that was the first time I ever met him. But he didn't strike me as, anything I didn't, I wasn't paying attention all the time. At the time, apparently, because my mom was preoccupied down here in California. So I remember I came home, and everything was fine. I was packing. A week later, a week later, I came home. I was sleeping at my parents' house. This is 6 in the morning. And like I said, I'm a night owl, so I'm not a morning person, so I was still sleeping. I remember like it was yesterday. Like I can close my eyes and just think of the scene. I was half asleep, I was going tossing and turning, almost starting to get up. So I remember my mom walking into my room, and she nudges me on the bed, and she was crying. And I stood up in bed right away. I'm like, what's wrong? What's wrong? What's going on? What's going on? And she was telling me through tears, I don't know how to tell you this. I don't know how to tell you this. And I was like, what's going on? What's going on? Tell me what's going on. And then she told me. And automatically I started panicking. And my head was spinning like I was not in reality at that time, I remember. And I slept on the second floor, so I ran down the stairs, and my uncle was on the phone with his brother Neff, and he was telling me what happened, what went down. And I was on the phone like, that's all I could say. Like, he was talking to me, but I couldn't hear him, if that makes sense. I was disassociating at that point. I wasn't in reality. At that point, we hung up the phone at some point. When I came home, I wasn't really talking to Jim. I didn't really want to talk to him. He came at the airport to come pick me up with my parents, because while I was at the airport, he kept calling me, oh, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done what I did, I couldn't stop thinking about you, blah, 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 whatever the fuck he said, I don't remember. So, but I was so devastated that I just needed someone that I knew on a different level than I do my parents. If that makes sense. So I called him on the phone and told him what happened, and he came over right away. He took the day off of work, and just stayed with me, watch TV. I didn't know, I was numb. I was watching TV. I remember watching Romancing the Stone. That's one of my favorite movies. We're watching Romancing the Stone on the TV, just trying to comprehend what was going on. In the meantime, my parents were working in the background trying to get me a ticket back to Maryland. I don't know, my mom kept telling me, stay in the living room, watch TV, calm down. And I kept crying off and on, and they were working in the background trying to get me a ticket out of bed the next day. So the next day, I get on the airplane, and mind you, my entire world was just crashing down on me, on my feet. My whole world just obliterated right in front of my face. And I remember sitting in the airplane, hearing these people laugh and joke and just carry on like nothing's happening, although my world just imploded. That was the worst feeling ever I felt in my entire life. The worst. I didn't know which way I was coming. I didn't know which way I was going. I had no clue what was going on. It just boarding the plane and getting to where you need to go and looking for my uncle and all this stuff. I was doing everything like in a haze, like a robot. Like I was just running on empty, but I was running on automatic. I don't know how to explain. You wouldn't know, and nobody will understand that unless they've gone through it before. So you can sympathize and you can say, I feel for you. But until you have that moment happen to you, you will not understand what I'm saying. Unbeknownst to me, my mom had given me a list of what I need to look for. I was his only beneficiary because I'm the only child, so. I'm the one who had to close out his bank accounts. I'm the one who had to pack up the apartment. I had to go through his things and pack up everything, sell everything. I had to sell his, well, my uncle insisted he wanted the truck. That's another thing. My uncle was trying to help me, Uncle Nev, his brother, and to this day I don't like him. But he tried to take advantage of what the fuck was going on, you know? I had no idea what I was doing, where I was coming, where I was going. Okay, just fucking take it. I don't care. Just whatever. Just take it. Because I didn't want to deal with it. I was just automatically on pilot mode. That's what I was doing. Just everything pilot mode. I was busy, packing up the apartment, closing out his bank accounts, selling his motorcycle, which he asked me a month before, do you want to ride on my motorcycle? And I said no, because I was too depressed thinking about what was going down here in California. And then like a month later I had to sell it. I kept some things, you know, for me in the box. I had his car, his Honda Civic hatchback, where so the gist of it is, one night, August 7th, my aunt calls her brother, my dad, on the phone and says, hey, I need a place to crash, you know, I don't know what's going on, he's going crazy on me, can I stay the night at your house? Can you come pick me up right now? And he said, yeah, I'll come pick you up, you know. So he went over to the townhouse. The police had already came and took a report, whatever. Apparently he's going erratic or whatever. So my aunt grabbed some clothes or whatever, took a bag with him, and my dad went and picked her up. They were driving outside the complex in that Honda Civic. They were driving out to exit her complex when all of a sudden he comes barreling down the road. This is my dad's car, this is his car, and beats him in the road. They stop, get out of the car, had a confrontation, and unalived them both. For the longest time, I was angry at a dead woman. I was angry at my aunt. Because if it hadn't been for her, my dad would still be alive. For many years, I carried that. Only after therapy was I able to realize that my dad was a fucking hero. My dad went to save his sister from an abusive person. That's all he was doing, and he got caught up in that. You know, and I was thinking, you know, if the roles were reversed and someone came out to me needing my help like that, fuck yeah, I'll be there in a heartbeat. It wasn't that person's fault that I lost my life to, you know? But I'll be there in a heartbeat.